Walking up this one hill was my nemesis. I had difficulty breathing. I had pain in my leg.
I lost my sense of taste and my sense of smell.
Brain fog, fatigue, headaches.
Because long COVID can have up to 50 symptoms associated with it, there is a lot of confusion about what is long COVID.
Not every veteran will see all of the providers, but many of the providers collaborate together in order to create a personalized health plan with the veteran and for the veteran.
I am extremely thankful to the VA to help create a roadmap for me.
If I use the starting point of once I released from the hospital, I feel tremendously better.
I have about a 70% improvement. I'm still feeling some symptoms, but I'm a lot better than when I was initially diagnosed.
And that's the good news. It does get better.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis. I'm your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Mark Holmes, Army National Guard veteran of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, all veteran-owned businesses, Cason Shaving Company, Black Cat Designs, and Savage American Woodwork. And I'm live in person with my next guests. I love doing these in-person shows, interviews, whatever, conversations, and I'm in parts unknown on a farm on a Sunday having a great time. And yes, I've got the warm stuff on because that's how it rolls here in Massachusetts. So I met my next guests at the Middleborough VFW. We were filming Art O'Callahan's song with Richard Fitz Jr., Mike Visconti, A Letter to M.I.A.s. And Richard says, you got to talk to Dawn, this woman Dawn. I want you to meet her. She has an interesting story. So we're going to get into that and what Dawn does and what she's doing for veterans. But for right now, Dawn Dutcher, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
This was an amazing, I had an amazing time doing the video. And it was a really great experience doing the shoot at the Middleborough VFW. They really opened the VFW for us to come in and do this. But Richard comes up to me and says, hey, you've got to meet Dawn. And so I go over there, and before we started filming, right, we start talking, and you had all these documents and pictures and materials, and you say, I got a story. Okay, I'm interested. And it wasn't anything like typical. So before we get into the good stuff, and let me tell you folks, it's good, give me a summary of who Dawn is and what you're doing now, please.
All right. So I'm a mom of 3 kids, a wife, and a nurse. We have this little family farmstead here, and we are just kind of building our dreams, if you will, right? So I was raised by my parents. My dad is an Italian immigrant who came here as a child and really kind of instilled in me, I think, the notion of America being the land of opportunity. And it's something that it's always resonated with me, and I've tried to pass that down along to my children as well. And so when I come across an endeavor, if it's near and dear to me, I'm going to pour my heart and soul into it because that's just what you do, right? That's how I was raised. And so that's what we're doing here. We've got some farm animals. I'm not saying we're living off the grid because we certainly are not, but that would be a wonderful dream of mine someday.
Well, I roll up here, folks, and I grew up on a farm. I'm like, oh yeah, this is just like the farm that, not quite like the farm, but it's like a farm, you know. They're working on Sunday, they're getting stuff ready to go, and we're in a barn, which is absolutely baller. I love the feeling I'm getting here. But you tell me some of this stuff on that Sunday in April, right? And then you start going over the real legacy of your father and what he did. And it, in a way, reminded me of Richard Fitz's father's story, but in a different way. But then part of it, I couldn't believe when you started going into it. So kind of take us back to, your growing up with your dad and what he did around the time of the Vietnam War in the early 70s.
Yeah. So my dad was a Vietnam era veteran. He was not combat related. He was in the Navy. And when he came home, he was very passionate always. My whole life, I remember, a child of the 70s. So in my early youth, I remember him just always making it a very poignant topic to make it kind of a dinner table conversation about the realities that were happening in the world. Part of that, this is late 70s, we had hostage situations that he felt like our government wasn't doing enough to bring those people home. And that also, part of that was the Vietnam vets. And from the time I was a little girl, it was just part of, what we did on the weekends when I would spend my time with him. We had a little horse farm at our family farm in Easton. And we were always going to rallies. He was always teaching me about, Vietnam and the guys that were left behind.
Yeah.
And that resonated my entire life. But what that translated into for him, because again, being a very passionate person, when he believed in something, he did anything possible to really drive that message home and spread the word for other people. So that led to him getting this idea that he needed to gain awareness for these people who he felt like had no voice.
Okay.
And at the time, I think there were like over 4,500 men that were unaccounted for from Vietnam. And he felt like the government wasn't doing enough to bring attention to this and to actually bring them home or to even look for them. And it was quite feasible that many of them were still alive at that point. And that was a tough thing for him to deal with. So he ended up getting this great idea that we all thought he was crazy at first, that the only way to get attention and to actually get media attention was the big thing even back then to these stories, was to make a big deal out of it. So late 70s, early 80s, and forgive me on the dates exactly, but his first trip, he decided he was going to ride his horse from Easton to Washington, D.C. and stop in every state along the way and try to get FaceTime with the governors and bring this proclamation forth to the governors and try to get the governors of each state along the way to sign on in support of gaining attention, getting media attention for this cause. So yeah, that was his very first trip, was to ride his horse from
All kidding aside, was he channeling the spirit of Paul Revere?
Okay, so funny story, but he actually, for his second trip, decided that he was going to wear a Paul Revere outfit, and I still have it to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So-
I'll go find it if I can.
So he started in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Your father does not sound like a guy who does things halfway done.
No.
So he probably hit Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey,
Yeah.
and then, Maryland and Pennsylvania?
Oh boy,
Virginia?
I believe that was his path. I mean, I know he took the horse over the George Washington Bridge, and that was not once but twice that happened. Yeah, and
I don't like doing it in a car.
I don't think you're supposed to do that, just for the record. And I'm pretty sure that he may be part of the reason that there are signs on the highway occasionally that say no horses permitted.
Okay, so he does this, and in a car, just straight through, that's like an 8-hour, 400-mile drive.
Yeah,
On good traffic with 95.
right.
How long did that take him?
He was gone for months. Yeah. So he rode down, he trailered back.
Okay.
So that was the good part, right? Once he got to DC and got his FaceTime with as many people as possible. And that was a little bit of a harder trip because you're going to the nation's capital where you're basically calling out the people that for maybe not doing as much as you feel like they should be doing.
Sure.
So he felt like he had so much support though on the way down, and that was a little more thrown together. And when he came home, he decided, well, let's take this a step further.
Now, this is all pre-internet, pre-Instagram, social media, TikTok, whatever.
Yeah.
And he still got the support he needed.
He did. A lot of it was a very grassroots, and when I say grassroots, truly grassroots. organization because, again, you had no real way of reaching people. So they had no idea where they were going to land in advance. And again, pre-GPS too, by the way, right? So this is old school maps, to get yourself there.
So like no Google Maps, no Waze, no nothing, just
Not even a cell phone.
no cell phone.
Yeah.
What was your mom's reaction to all this during the time?
Well, they were separated, and
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that we probably all thought he was a little bit crazy
Okay.
at the time. It was a big undertaking, and I feel like maybe you've got to be a little crazy to take on something like that in a good way, but
Well, still, what was it like? It had to be daunting for him to understand that, maybe he didn't serve in Vietnam, but he had to have met people who did serve in Vietnam.
Absolutely. I mean, he was in the service. I think he went in '68. So, that's absolutely the era. And people, regardless of whether you were in the service or not, everybody had friends and family that were drafted. And he grew up in Brockton, was living in Brockton, and it was a lot for him to see these guys go, and many of them not come home. But even the ones that came home were treated so poorly by so many people, and it was a complete injustice in his mind.
So this wasn't just for him to get attention, like he had skin in the game. He wanted to see justice for, I wouldn't say justice, but recognition. And I've been told by Vietnam veterans how they got treated, and it's completely different than it was for today. So
Absolutely.
he does this and he trailers back, and then he gets another idea from what you told me, right?
Yes, yeah. So this was around '81, because I think I was in the first grade. He actually decided that he was going to do a little local fundraising, and thankfully he had made some contacts on his trip to Washington, and he picked up a couple of guys. One guy was from Pennsylvania who was like, I'm in this with you. I agree that this is a worthy cause and that we need to not stop here. So they ended up investing in a horse trailer and a box truck and painted the whole thing. I mean, I have pictures of him out there literally hand painting the letters on this. And both vehicles were hand painted with letters about the P.O.W.s, stats about the number of people that were missing in action. And so that was really designed to be another way to gain attention for this movement. And they decided that they were going to ride from Massachusetts to California on horseback. And I remember I think it was May 15th of 1981, if I'm not mistaken, or right around there. He actually rode the horse to my school in East Bridgewater. I was in elementary school, and they called me down to the guidance office, and he said goodbye to me, and that was, I didn't see him for almost 3 years.
3 years. Because, just a point of reference, I rode my motorcycle from Yuma, where I was in the Marine Corps, to Boston. It was like 3,700 miles, all said and done. And it was, 8 days of hard riding, right? I can't imagine doing it on a horse.
Yeah. He had an old paint who was this sturdy, amazing trail riding horse. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was around 24 at the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she was amazing. He named her American Thunder, actually. We called her Thunder.
Love that, yeah.
Yeah. And he rode her all the way to California. And so he started out with a few people, and then some people would decide that they could, do a small leg of the trip with them and ride along with them. So there were times where it was nobody but him, because really logistically, they always had to have someone with the vehicle that could go meet them ahead someplace. But they were usually days ahead of them, because you can't account for weather.
Right.
Especially back then, you have no idea until it's rolling in, what the weather is going to be like. And along the way, he would have families that brought him in. He was brought in by a lot of families from like VFWs and different veteran associated organizations. And sometimes they would invite him into their home and give him a hot meal, and other times he slept in the barn with the horse.
Now, is he meeting with governors and politicians and dignitaries along the way?
That was his goal.
Okay.
At every state, his goal was to hit the state capitol and to try to get some kind of face time with the governors of that state.
Was he successful in that?
He was.
Really?
In many of the states, he was able to actually, and we've got some official proclamations from governors in support of this movement, which I can show you later. But yeah, his very first one was with Mike Dukakis of Massachusetts.
Wait a minute.
That's how.
The Mike Dukakis, the tank guy?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the first governor that he met with, yeah, who was all on board. So we've got some pretty cool pictures of him signing the proclamation with my dad. Yeah.
So he does this. It takes him years. And I know you were young, but how do you think he changed when he got done with his journey?
You know what? I think it was a hard journey all around for everyone.
Yeah.
Being a little kid, I don't think you necessarily can appreciate the magnitude of this. But what I will always tell you is I had no idea. I was excited for the cause, but not excited, of course, as an elementary school kid to lose my dad for those few years. And he always would say to me, Donna, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for you. Because your generation is going to have to, if we allow these things to happen now, your generation is going to be the one that has the consequence to deal with, not mine. And it never made any sense to me until I became a parent. And I see the state of the world and some of the directions that it's going, and I feel the same way about my children.
Yeah.
What we fight for today isn't for us, it's for the future.
Sure.
Right? But also his cause was twofold, because it earnestly was not okay in his mind to leave those people behind.
Well, that's the thing that you said very clearly to me in April at the Middleborough VFW. It was his view, and not just his, but a lot of other people's, that we had left people in Vietnam and knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big statement. I mean, did he base this on letters and facts and talking with people, or was that something the government kind of just brushed underneath the rug?
Yes to all of that. Yeah. So the government acknowledged a certain number of people, but we knew, because you have to remember too, this was still the time period that people were alive. And not many of them, not enough of them, but occasionally people would escape. They'd escape the POW camps. And for anybody that isn't familiar, POW is prisoner of war, MIA is missing in action, right? So, and they lock arms. Those two go hand in hand.
Right.
So we knew that there were a lot of people that may have not made it home alive, but they weren't making it home at all. So their bodies were oftentimes never recovered. Or in Richard Fitt's situation, not for decades. But there were people that were alive behind enemy lines that were occasionally making it out and getting word out, and then that information was getting back to the States in a number of different ways during that time period. And reporters, occasionally could still lightly cover those stories. So the information was here. We had good intel, and the government had good intel, to the best of my knowledge, that there were people that needed to come home, and the effort was not made like it could have been and should have been.
Your father does this. He commits anywhere from 3 to 10 years of his life just on this. Did he ever see any fruits of his labor?
I think he was very optimistic that things would change, but realistically, I don't believe that we had any big movement after that continued. There was not enough momentum. And again, back then we had not the ways to reach the masses, because most of these articles that were being written about him were in small town newspapers, right? he was even hard pressed to get places like the Boston Globe to cover these things, right? And for whatever the reason, whether they felt like it wasn't a worthy enough news story or maybe they were being asked not to cover it. But if it was a political hot button, then it may have just been brushed under the carpet.
You grew up with this and this story that I'm sitting there at the VFW like, you really can't make any of this up.
No.
I mean, and just goes to show, I've been saying all this year, Dawn, that, you know, this is a year where I really discovered that I don't know a lot, right? What happened to you as you became a parent and started seeing this for your children, seeing the Afghanistan war and Iraq war? How did this start affecting you personally and some of the things that you're doing now?
Well, I knew for a fact that if it could happen back then, there would be nothing keeping it from happening now. Yeah. And I have children that are, you know, now draft age, and I do worry that that could be a problem in the future. And I see that I see with my own eyes that there's not necessarily enough coverage of the items and the topics these days that need to be covered. So veterans organizations and veterans as a whole have always just held a very special place in my heart. I mean, that's what I grew up in, right, is meeting these guys. And as my dad got older, we spent a lot of time at the VA hospitals. And, you know, it's amazing to me that we see these guys who lived through these eras, right? And they proudly wear their caps and their jackets with their information on it, you know, Vietnam era or World War II or what have you. And that is something they will never forget. It becomes ingrained in the being of who they are. And I think growing up like that, it also had that effect on me. So there's a certain amount of emotion that you can't disconnect from it. So it has always been something, any opportunity that I've had to go, whether it's putting flags in at the cemetery, the laying of the wreaths, it's honoring the people that need to be honored. And it doesn't matter to me whether you've seen combat or not. It's the simple fact that we've put these people in a position to go out there and risk their lives. And many of them have, and many of them have still risked their lives because they come home as a part of the person, just a portion that went there.
Now, you were talking to me, you know, through text and before this, that you've taken what your father started and kind of carried that forward to other types of veterans advocacy. And I was hoping you'd tell me about that. You know, what are you doing now to help veterans, you know, where you are? Right.
So I'm a nurse by trade, 29 years. And
Wait a minute, stop.
Yeah.
Do you have any syringes on you right now?
No.
What about Benadryl?
I could get some Benadryl. Do you need some?
No, but I hear it cures what ails you.
Oh, yeah.
Every nurse has either a syringe, one of those tourniquet thingies, the rubber thingies.
Oh, yeah.
Or some Benadryl.
Well, we happen to be in the barn. If we were in the house, that might be a horse of another color.
Okay, we're going to stay in the barn.
Yeah.
So you've been a nurse for 29 years, and you're doing other stuff now too, right?
Yeah, so I've actually partnered with a US-based CBD company, and with hemp wellness, it has become a second passion for me.
Really?
Or another passion, and it really is just an extension of being a caregiver, I think. So anybody that's a nurse or knows a nurse knows that you can't, it's not just your 9 to 5. You don't just punch the clock and come home and that's where it ends, right?
Yep.
So you are the person that is going to, good, bad, or indifferent, be in other people's business trying to help them.
Okay.
And that, I entered into this business looking for something for one of my children, actually, to help them. I've got a son that's on the spectrum. Sure. And just doing this for as long as I have, and not to say that, you know, Big Pharma doesn't have a place, but I see it oftentimes causing more damage than good, and that's with mental health, with physical pain, with emotional traumas as well. And I've seen the damage, however, that using that recklessly can create, and we all have at this point. It's not a secret
Sure.
that we have an opioid epidemic, and oftentimes that has been born of somebody truly meaning and being well-intentioned to help someone else, but not realizing that the horse can get out of the gate real fast, right? And we've created this environment, unfortunately, where we have so many people that are dependent on things, and the mental health crisis in this country is, as far as I can see, as bad as it's ever been. We do a terrible job at talking about it, and especially for veterans, to me, that is a topic that is 110% worth having an open conversation about and candid conversation about, because we touched a little bit on this. I see that whether you are combat related or not, there's barely a person around that's been in the service that is not affected somehow by some of the goings on that have happened in their service related
Sure.
careers. And that's really where the CBD comes in. Our company has actually, we are the farmers down in North Carolina, and we have decided to partner with Fairways for Warriors, which is one of the many organizations that locks arms with veterans. They do a lot of, so this particular organization takes to the golf course and does a lot of therapy that way. And we have decided that that is the direction that we need to go, is to do more work with veterans.
World War I, World War II were catastrophic in terms of life lost, right? The Vietnam War and Korean War were terrible, but it seems like, because my grandfather served in World War II, that their way to cope was to not talk about it and then self-medicate through alcohol.
Oftentimes, yes.
And what's the difference between, my grandfathers and guys like me and, people who are serving now?
Well, this is my personal opinion.
Sure.
But I think the way that we live every day is dramatically different than the way that they lived. So you have to think about just the way the world was even 50 years ago, never mind, 75, 100 years ago. So we've had battles since the inception of time.
Right.
It doesn't matter, the Roman Empire right on through to current day, right? It
Sure.
just is a different place in the world. But the world was dramatically different. So we had people that had outlets, whether they viewed it as an outlet or not. When they came home, you've seen the movie The Patriot,
Yep.
right? With Mel Gibson. So he came home and he had a farm and he worked the lands and he had a family to care for. So in a lot of ways, I do believe that a lot of the things that we miss out on these days by the convenience that we exchange in exchange for convenience, we're not growing our own foods, which is another thing, is that we have foods that are just no good for us. There's toxins, there's additives, there's MSG, there's all sorts of things that do a terrible job on our neurologic system, right? But the other thing is, we're not out riding horses. We are not out working the farms. Those are mental distractions, which can also be therapeutic, to literally put your hands in the dirt and work the fields. I do firmly believe it's a lot of our lifestyle is a lot different. So what happens when these guys come home and nowadays they're truly left with little, in their mindset at least, little to no resources. They come home and maybe they go back out and get a job, but in their off time, we're not doing things to expend that energy.
Sure.
And we are certainly oftentimes not doing anything therapeutic for us.
Well, just in the aspect, I've talked to multiple World War II veterans, and all of them said they pretty much got off the boat, got on the train, got to home, and all of them went back to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
There was a job waiting for them, or they worked in their family farm or family business. But the point is, they had a place to stay, and they had a job.
Mm-hmm.
And, me personally, when I got out of the Marine Corps, it wasn't like that. I had to, it was a very hey, you're alone. A lot of guys get out and they don't know what to do. It's double that for female veterans trying to figure out how to reintegrate back into society. So I definitely see where you're coming from. What you're doing for veterans now, what are you hoping happens with that work?
I hope that people understand for themselves that there is another way.
Yeah.
I hope that they understand that there is hope out there. That to me is the biggest thing, because once you lose hope in yourself and in your future, that's when the demons start to creep in, realistically. Not everybody's a religious person. Not everybody is going to turn to religion to save them. Sometimes the saving for some people is going to have to come from within. And by giving people the tools, hemp happens to be an amazing tool because our body has a system, an endocannabinoid system, right? Which most of us didn't know. And I was a nurse of 25 years before I even knew about this. So we have a system in our body that is literally made to uptake cannabinoid. So we can produce enough of our own, or some of our own, but not enough to actually function properly. It's very similar to vitamin D, right?
Okay.
So if you don't have enough of it because our food is depleted, we're not outside enough, we're not making enough vitamin D, you need to take it from the outside for your body to function properly. The endocannabinoid system is literally the master regulator for the entire human body, from your brain right on down to the tips of your toes. And by helping, now I would love to say it's a magic wand. It is not, but it is one of the many tools in your toolbox to be able to care for yourself and give yourself some of the proper elemental nutrients back that it needs, so that your mental health can function properly, so that you're not, we have chronic pain for a lot of you guys come back with terrible knees from jumping out of planes, and backs, and shoulders, and basically you need to be restored like a new car, like a classic car rather, by the time you're 45,
it's the miles, Dawn. It's the miles.
Yeah. So, but it's getting people to realize that there are options for them. That is one of the options, is getting themselves back into a good harmonious groove with what nature intended for them.
So Dawn, look. I said this, and we'll get into why here in a little bit, but I just thought feeling bad all the time was just part of the game.
No.
Like, I wouldn't know what it's like to really feel great.
Yeah.
So I'm just used to feeling bad.
I get it. I did that for a long time, and I thought I was doing great, taking 800 of Motrin twice a day, and that was my life, waking up looking like a 95-year-old man, with a cane, and not being able to stand upright for about an hour and a half every day. But that goes, I can attribute my pain to farm life. I was the smallest, so when we dig the 6-foot deep water trench at the horse farm, I was the one sent down into the hole to throw the boulders out of the hole. My first back injury was at 12. So my spine has decided to compress at a very early age. I would like to think that I'm supposed to be about 5'8", so my BMI is probably not off that much, but my doctors have other opinions on that. But realistically, right? So all of us have things that we deal with, and every single one of us. It's really very interesting, and psychology was always a big thing that my dad talked about, and I think that resonated with me as I got older, because what you think about, you bring about, right? And for every single one of us, mindset is about 80% of the game. And when people are not given the right tools to help with that, then you're going to continue to feel like you're on that hamster wheel of doom and despair. You need to have other resources given to you.
Sure.
And the support too.
Well, that's just it. For a lot of people, veterans especially, raising that hand and saying, I need help is a huge obstacle to overcome.
We should just assume that everybody needs help. That's more realistic, I think, than to ask people to come forward.
But you're told to ask for help in one breath. In the next breath, you're told, you're weak, and real men don't ask for help. Right. Or you serve in the military, so you shouldn't need help. You should just be quiet and suck it up. Right. That's a hard mindset to change.
It is, but somebody's got to do it.
Okay.
Right? Just like my dad, somebody's got to do it.
What's the thing that I liked about the story when we started talking about it, and I'll have some of these images in the video, folks, is he took action. Mm-hmm. with a horse, with the hat on, and it was really cool seeing the different people, recognize his presence. He made a mark. And as you carry his legacy forward, how would you want to see your legacy turn out?
You know what? My legacy is also through my children.
Yeah.
The best thing that I can do is leave. Now, I would love for my opinion to be heard around the world and for people to listen to it, but nobody cares who I am, right? But when enough voices come together on any one subject, and we are all, it's like being at a stadium and one person is singing the national anthem, but then suddenly the whole stadium starts.
Yep.
That is something that truly brings chills to my bones, right? When we all sing the same song and say the same thing about change that needs to happen, that is the day that it's going to happen. But when we are so worried about what this person might say and what that person might say, we have no one to blame but ourselves. So I can only, realistically, I know I can only change my small microcosm. The people that I'm raising have to be my number one, and they are going to be my legacy. And I've always tried to raise them with that same mindset, to think, to be free thinkers. And if you see something, say something, right? If something's not right, you've got to speak up. You've got to be the one to get loud. Because when we don't get loud on a subject, nothing will ever change.
Sure.
So find your passion. That's really the biggest thing. Find something that's important to you and be passionate about it. There are so many people that are, they're happy to wear the flag on their lapel, but what does that mean? What are you doing behind that? That means nothing if you're not actually taking action.
And action is something your father did, and he certainly, left an impression on the people that he came across. As you told me the story and showed me, he talked to this person, and that person. How can people, connect with, what you're doing now, with the healing you're doing, and support you that way?
Well, I have a website that I can send people to. I call it a concierge service. So it doesn't matter who you are. I'm never going to just try to put a product in your hand and leave you misguided.
Sure.
To me, it's important that if you're doing anything, and this happens to be CBD, but you're always going to get my 2 cents, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm always going to talk to people about the diet and the things that their activity level and the things that they're doing too, because it's really more health coaching, and some of that is mental health coaching, but it's getting people on the right track. And if it's just one component, you're missing the boat. We have to address it from.
Are you saying it's a true mind, body, soul synergy?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I will have that link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, ladies and gentlemen. And again, if you saw the video, I'll link that too in the post of a letter to M.I.A.s that Art O'Callahan wrote, and we taped it at the Middleborough VFW. Dawn is in the video, and it was a great meeting you and getting to understand the story. And I'm just loving being in your barn talking now. What a great energy we have here.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're trying.
Absolutely. Well, again, folks, you'll have all the information about what Dawn's doing in the show post. Check out what her father did, and remember that you can take action anywhere, anytime. I'm Travis with Oscar Mike Radio. I'm with Dawn Dutcher. As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight. Thank you.
Join us on National Wreaths Across America Day, December 16th, 2023. Each December on National Wreaths Across America Day, our mission to remember, honor, and teach is carried out by coordinating wreath-laying ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery, as well as more than 3,700 additional locations in all 50 states, at sea and abroad. Join us by sponsoring a veteran's wreath at a cemetery near you, volunteering, or donating to a local sponsor group.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 998 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.